The world ways opened before Savitri. A guidance turned the dumb revolving wheels, and in the eager body of their speed, the dim-masked hooded godheads rode who move assigned to man immutably from his birth, receivers of the inner and outer law, at once the agents of his spirit's will and witnesses and executors of his fate.
9. In this book, we've seen the birth and childhood of Savitri, her growing up into a young woman, her education in the Vedic culture, and then in the last canto, her father, King Aswapati, is inspired, has a vision, kind of sees Savitri in a new light, and he's inspired to speak to her and tell her to go out into the world to seek her mate, her companion soul that is out there somewhere waiting for her. And now in this canto, Savitri is going out, is traveling through the lands of India, looking for her mate, but encountering various things along the way. So we'll begin at the top of page 379. Perhaps B, you could begin.
At first, her path ran far through peopled tracts, admitted to the lion eye of states and theaters of the loud act of man. Her carven chariot, with its fretted wheels, threaded through clamorous marts and sentinel towers, past figured gates and high dream-sculptured fronts, and gardens hung in the sapphire of the skies. Pillared assembly halls with armored guards, small fanes where one calm image watched man's life, and temples hewn as if by exiled gods to imitate their lost eternity. Often, from gilded dusk to argent dawn, where jewel lamps flickered on frescoed walls, and the stone lattice stared at moonlit boughs. Half conscious of the tardy, listening night, dimly she glided between the banks of sleep, at rest in the slumbering palace of kings.
Thank you. So we see the beginning of her journey begins running through populated areas, through different states. At that time, city-states of India ruled by kings. So she was admitted to the lion eye of states, This lion eye, I suppose, means seats of power. Shraddhavan speaks of them as the capital cities of these states. And these cities, these areas, are theaters of the loud act of man. So they're active, dynamic cities. Her chariot threaded through clamorous marts and sentinel towers, past figured gates and high dream-sculptured fronts, and gardens hung in the sapphire of the skies. So quite a developed, beautiful, civilized areas she's going through, perhaps with palaces, pillared assembly halls with armored guards. And then contrasting that, small fanes, small little lanes in the town where one calm image watched man's life. So small, gods or goddesses sculptured, looking on the life of the people, and temples hewn as if by exiled gods, to imitate their lost eternity. So she's traveling through these areas from gilded dusk, the golden evenings, to argent dawn, to the silvery white dawn, throughout the night, where jewel lamps flickered on frescoed walls. Frescoes are paintings, carvings on the walls of the town, and the stone lattice stared at moonlit boughs. Lattices are carvings. Half conscious of the tardy listening night, dimly she glided between banks of sleep. So she's dozing off in her chariot as she passes through these areas during the night, at rest in the slumbering palaces of kings. Perhaps she's stopping in some of these palaces. Of course, she herself has come from a palace of her father. Now we continue.
Hamlet and village saw the fate wane pass. Homes of a life bent to the soil it plows for sustenance of its short and passing days, that, transient, keep their old repeated course, unchanging in the circle of a sky which alters not above our mortal toil. Away from this thinking creature's burdened hours, to free and griefless spaces now she turned, not yet perturbed by human joys and fears. Here was the childhood of primeval earth. Here timeless musings, large and glad and still, men had forborne as yet to fill with cares, imperial acres of the eternal sower, and wind-stirred grasslands winking in the sun. Or mid green musing of wood and rough-browed hills, in the grove's murmurous bee air humming wild, or past the long lapsing voice of silver floods, like a swift hope journeying among its dreams, hastened the chariot of the golden bride.
Thank you. So Savitri passes beyond these people tracks, these more populated areas of the cities, into the countryside, into the small towns, the hamlet and village, saw the fate wain pass. The wain is a chariot drawn by horses. Hers is a fated chariot, fated to meet her spouse. So they pass homes of a life bent to the soil it plows, homes of the agricultural workers in these small villages, for sustenance of its short and passing days, that transient keep their old repeated course, unchanging in the circle of a sky which alters not above our mortal toil. So these are simple farmers working the fields, a heavy, toiling life, short and passing days, doing repeatedly the same work over and over, in the circle of a sky which alters not above our human toil. And then, away from this thinking creature's burdened hours, to free and griefless spaces now she turned. So now she goes out further into the countryside where there are few people, not yet perturbed by human joys and fears. Here was the childhood of primeval earth. Here, timeless musings, large and glad and still, men had forborne as yet to fill with cares. So she's going out more into the nature, less inhabited areas, imperial acres of the eternal sower, so large tracts of land, fields, and wind-stirred grasslands winking in the sun. Or amid green musing of woods and rough-browed hills. So we get beautiful imagery of this countryside, long lapsing voice of silvery floods of the rivers and streams, like a swift hope journeying among its dreams. So we get some of the beautiful nature poetry from Sri Aurobindo here. We continue, Krista.
Out of the world's immense unhuman past, tracked memories and ageless remnants came, domains of light, and softened to antique calm. Listen to the unaccustomed sound of hoofs and large, immune, entangled silences, absorbed her into emerald secrecy. And slow, hushed, wizard nets of fiery bloom environed with their colored snare her wheels. The strong, importunate feet of time felt soft along these lonely ways, his tightened pace forgotten, and his stark and ruinous rounds. The inner ear that listens to solitude, leaning self-wrapped unboundedly, could hear the rhythm of the intense or wordless thought that gathers in the silence behind life, and the low, sweet, inarticulate voice of earth in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance ascended with its yearning undertone.
Thank you. As Savitri goes out further into these unpopulated areas, she senses more that primeval earth from its immense unhuman past, from its long past. These fields and meadows and streams have existed for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And some memories of that time she senses, that long history before man. Tracked memories and ageless remnants came. Domains of light in fief to antique calm. This word in fief, that means invested with the possession of. So the light and the calm are invested in each other. They're closely knit together. And they listen to the unaccustomed sound of hooves. Even passers-by are very rare in these places. And large, immune, entangled silences. Can imagine at that time, a couple thousand years ago, that there were areas of India that were not populated and still had that primeval sense of the earth, of the nature. So those silences absorbed her into emerald secrecy, into the green of the trees and their silences. And slow hushed wizard nets of fiery bloom. So these are flowers and creepers growing on the ground, environed with their colored snare, her wheels. So her wheels would get caught up in these vines and flowers. The strong, importunate feet of time fell soft. Importunate is persistent, relentless. So here, that kind of hurried kind of life was slowed down. That slowed, fell soft among these lonely ways. His tightened pace, the pace of time, forgotten, and his stark and ruinous rounds. The inner ear that listens to solitude, leaning self-wrapped, unboundedly, could hear the rhythm of the intenser, wordless thought that gathers in the silence behind life. So in that deep silence of that place, the mind could go deeper within, into that silence, could hear the rhythm of the wordless thought, the deeper thoughts that come from within. And the slow, sweet, inarticulate voice of earth in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance ascended with its yearning undertone. So she could hear the inner sound, the deeper sound of her own thoughts, but also this murmur of the nature, the inarticulate voice of earth that also ascended with its yearning undertone. Sometimes Sri Aurobindo expresses this idea that nature also is yearning for the divine in its own silent way. Can we continue, Jean?
Afar from the brute noise of clamorous needs, the quieted all-seeking mind could feel, at rest from its blind outwardness of will, the unwearied clasp of her mute, patient love, and know for a soul the mother of our forms. This spirit stumbling in the fields of sense, this creature bruised in the mortar of the days, could find in her broad spaces of release. Not yet was a world all occupied by care. The bosom of our mother kept for us still, her austere regions and her musing depths, her impersonal reaches lonely and inspired, and the mightiness of her rapture haunts. Muse-lipped, she nursed her symbol mysteries, and guarded for her pure-eyed sacraments the valley clefts between her breasts of joy, her mountain altars for the fires of dawn, and nuptial beaches where the ocean couched, and the huge chanting of her prophet woods.
Thank you. Pause there. As she goes further into these pristine, natural places, her mind quiets, her will, her needs, all of these things recede, and she can know for a soul the mother of our forms. She could sense nature as our soul, as a being who is nurturing us. So she retires back from her surface mind and life and desires. And then she can feel the soul of nature. I think so. The mother of our forms. Physical nature.
Talking about the soul. Soul is the mother of about different forms which we do in different lives.
I think what he's saying is that a person could understand that the mother of our forms is a soul. I think sensing the soul of nature. And then again he refers to this outward mind and life, this spirit stumbling in the fields of sense, this creature bruised in the mortar of the days, could find in her broad spaces of release. Her again referring to this nature. Not yet was a world all occupied by care. The bosom of our mother kept for us still her austere regions and her musing depths, her impersonal reaches, lonely and inspired, and the mightinesses of her rapture haunts. So she kept these different areas, austere regions, kind of lonely, bare, and her musing depths, her impersonal reaches.
Was this together with the childhood of bilingual girls? That is a page from
Well, yeah. Yeah, he's speaking of Mother Nature. So it is this primeval, because he senses her deeper sense in this quiet place. And she's retiring away back, going deeper within herself from her surface mind and life. So she senses these things in her inner being. Muse-lipped, she nursed her symbol mysteries. Again, he's referring to the nature. And guarded for her pure-eyed sacraments, the valley clefts between her breasts of joy. So she kept guarded for pure-eyed sacraments, the valley clefts, between the hills, between the mountains, her breaths of joy. Her mountain altars for the fires of dawn, and nuptial beaches where the ocean couched, and the huge chanting of her prophet woods. So these places, these very special places that he's describing, nature was kind of holding, guarding for pure-eyed sacraments. So these are like places of offerings to the divine. These valleys and mountains and beaches and prophet woods. Margaret, next.
Fields had she of her solitary mirth, plains hushed and happy in the embrace of light, alone with the cry of birds and hue of flowers, and wildernesses of wonder lit by her moons, and grey sere evenings kindling with the stars, and dim movements in the night's infinitude. august, exulting in her Maker's eye, she felt her nearness to him in earth's breast, conversed still with the light behind the veil, still communed with eternity beyond. A few and fit inhabitants she called to share the glad communion of her peace. The breadth, the summit, were their natural home. The strong king sages from their labor done, freed from the warrior tangents of their task, came to her serene sessions in these wilds. The strife was over, the respite lay in front. Happy they lived with birds and beasts and flowers and sunlight and the rustle of the leaves, and heard the wild winds wandering in the night, mused with the stars in their mute constant ranks, and lodged in the mornings as in azure tents, and with the glory of the noons were one.
Thank you. Sri Aurobindo continues speaking of this Mother Earth, nature, fields had she of her solitary mirth, of her single happiness, plains hushed and happy in the embrace of light, alone with the cry of birds and hue of flowers, and wildernesses of wonder lit by her moons, and gray sear evenings kindling with the stars, and dim movement in the night's infinitude. So it's interesting that I think these pronouns are all referring still to Mother Nature, and I used to had thought that this was referring to Savitri, but it doesn't seem to be so.
Don't you think it's more?
Well, there's that hint, but the way he presents it, lit by her moons, it's got to be nature's moons.
She's identified.
Maybe she's identifying.
For me, the reeds is all that how we should pass through the cities and come to nature. Our deeper longing as this goes here, and like to go experience in nature. I mean, a little bit the struggle in our ways about this, and create and to have this nature.
So he's kind of described that this nature is, she's sensing the soul of nature almost as a being. And then here, august, exulting in her maker's eye. So again, nature is exulting under the eye of the divine. She felt her nearness to him in earth's breast.
August means royal.
Yes, August means royal.
She means Savitri here.
I don't think so. I think it's all nature.
Nearest to the earth's breast.
Yeah, nature is feeling. The soul of nature is feeling. Perhaps Savitri is identifying with this. But that's what's interesting, I think, about this.
Use capital S.
Still communed with eternity beyond. A few and fit inhabitants she called to share the glad communion of her peace. Nature.
Oh, I think here she's now asking kings, retired kings, to share their views.
That's the way it sounds, but nature could also be calling these people to share in her communion with the divine, these sages and saints who could share in that. So these are a few fit inhabitants nature called to enjoy with her the divine.
I think that's what you said. That's the soul of nature.
Yeah.
I think that's so unusual for us.
Yeah.
Deuteronomy describes the kings and who have retired, and then
Yeah.
she's having sessions with them. It's an introduction to that.
But it seems like the way he describes is that nature is, this is all part of nature. She's calling a few souls to participate in this. Anywhere we don't see Savitri directly referred to.
But happy they live with birds and beasts and last they means here the kings, retired people who have retired.
Right. So then Sri Aurobindo is describing these other fit inhabitants, these sages and seers. He's going to describe different types of them. The strong king sages, from their labor done. So these are kings and warriors who have retired now and are going into the nature and finding their peace and unity with the divine in the last stages of their life. Freed from the warrior tension of their task, came to her serene sessions in these wilds. The strife was over, the respite lay in front. Their rest, their quietness was now ahead of them. Happy they lived with birds and beasts and flowers, and the sunlight and the rustle of the leaves, and heard the wild winds wandering in the night, mused with the stars in their mute constant ranks, and lodged in the mornings as in azure tents, and with the glory of the noons were one. So we continue, you continue.
Some deeper plunged from life's external clasp, beckoned into a fiery privacy in the soul's unprofaned star-white recess. They sojourned with an ever-living bliss. A voice profound in the ecstasy and the hush they heard beheld an all-revealing light. All time made difference they overcame. The world was fibered with their own heartstrings. Close drawn to the heart that bears in every breast, they reached the one self in all through the boundless love. Attuned to silence and to the world rhyme, they loosened the knot of the imprisoning mind. Achieved was a wide, untroubled witness gaze. Unsealed was a nature's great spiritual eye. To the height of heights rose now their daily climb. Truth leaned to them from her supernal realm. Above them blazed eternity's mystic suns. Nameless the austere ascetics without home, abandoning speech and motion and desire, aloof from creatures, set, absorbed, alone, immaculate in tranquil heights of self, on concentration luminous voiceless peaks, world-naked hermits with their matted hair, immobile as the passionless great hills, around them grouped like thoughts of some vast mood, awaiting the infinite's behest to end. The seers attuned to the universal will, content in him who smiles behind earth's forms, abode ungrieved by the insistent days.
Thank you. So now we come to the ascetics who've retired from the world to commune with the divine. Some deeper plunged from life's external clasp, beckoned into a fiery privacy, as if called into this fiery inner self, in the soul's unprofaned star-white recess. They sojourned with an ever-living bliss. They traveled within with this ever-living bliss. A voice profound in the ecstasy and the hush. They heard, beheld an all-revealing light. They heard the voice of the divine within, in the ecstasy and the silence, and beheld an all-revealing light. All time made difference they overcame. The world was fibered with their own heartstrings. Close drawn to the heart that beats in every breast, they reached the one self in all through boundless love. So they felt that love from within, extending outward, encompassing all other beings. And they united with the one self in all beings through love. Attuned to silence and to the world rhyme, they loosened the knot of the imprisoning mind. Achieved was the wide, untroubled witness gaze. Sri Aurobindo speaks of this as a stage in the sadhana, especially the sadhana of knowledge, of realizing this witness Purusha that is unattached, detached from all the movements of nature, observing it disinterestedly as a passive witness, unaffected by all that takes place. So they had achieved that poise of the spirit, looking upon all of nature. Unsealed was nature's great spiritual eye. This is that witness gaze, looking upon all of nature.
This talking about the essence of the Gita, and here explain also how this old warrior in the tradition had to be detached from that in all the qualities of the sage that was needed for being a warrior. So that it's a deep understanding that the Gita has this quality and then
so the warriors of that time of the Gita had developed also this detachment from things. Well, also they had a very brutal kind of work that they had to do, so they could remain detached from it. So they perhaps had some training in this.
But Sri Krishna clarifies to Arjuna that detachment being shown in that message. It's more of an inner detachment.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're speaking of an inner detachment. That one is unaffected. One still carries out this work. One is still engaged in the warrior tasks, but one is unaffected by it. One is as if looking upon it from a distance.
But certain outer detachment is also practiced.
Well, that is the ascetics who retire from the world. They're retiring from all. He speaks of them even without movement, without any speech, any desire. They also are here. But first, as a first stage, there is this witness gaze that one has to realize. To the height of heights rose now their daily climb. Truth leaned to them from her supernal realm. Above them blazed eternity's mystic suns. So then he continues referring to these ascetics, austere ascetics without home, abandoning speech and motion and desire, aloof from creatures, sat absorbed, alone, immaculate, in tranquil heights of self, on concentrations, luminous, voiceless peaks. So they just go off into these desolate places, alone, going into meditation, concentrating on the silent self. World naked hermits with their matted hair, immobile as the passionless great hills, around them grouped like thoughts of some vast mood, awaiting the infinite's behest to end. It's as if they're just waiting for the directive, the command of the Supreme to end, I think, their life and go off into the transcendent absolute, leave their physical body. The seers, attuned to the universal will, content in Him who smiles behind earth's forms, abode ungrieved by the insistent days. These perhaps are still another type, focused.
Aesthetics, he was aesthetics.
Yeah.
Now he's described the seers.
Yeah. And perhaps even these could be like karma yogis.
Seers, like they, I think, here is the effect that they believe in form. Aesthetics believe in formless.
Seers believe in form. They see seer as someone who sees visions, sees forms. But they're attuned to the universal will. So they're attuned to action also, you know? But yet they're content in Him who smiles behind earth's forms. So they're not, again, involved in the turmoils of life. They're just following out the Eternal's will. They abode ungrieved by the insistent days. So even though the days were insistent, even though maybe their lives were active and had their cares, they were unaffected by all of that. Sudan.
He's all the time, in the beginning of the paragraph, he's talking of silence and all the time. Then he comes up with the words fiery place.
Fiery.
Fiery also, so going inside is also fiery.
There's a fiery aspiration also within, no?
Green trees girdling a hill, young grave disciples fashioned by their touch, trained to the simple act and conscious word, greatened within and grew to meet their heights, far wandering seekers on the Eternal's path, brought to these quiet founts their spirit thirst, and spent the treasures of a silent hour, bathed in the purity of the mild gaze that uninsistent ruled them from its peace, and by its influence found the ways of calm. The infant of the monarchy of the world, the heroic leaders of a coming time, king children nurtured in that spacious air, like lions grumbling in sky and sun, receive half-consciously their godlike stamp, form in the type of the high thoughts they sang. They learn the wide magnificence of mood that makes us comrades of the cosmic urge, no longer chained to their small separate selves, plastic and firm beneath the eternal hand, met nature with a bold and friendly clasp,
and sorbed in her the power that shapes her work.
Thank you.
Let's say line which I did not beginning of the I'm saying line 165, beckoned into the fiery privacy, into the soul's unprofaned starlight recess. You are developing, they are all about peace and peaceful and going inside. Then he repeats this word fiery, which I do not understand.
I think it's intense aspiration, that's what you mentioned. The fire of the soul. The peace is one aspect, but the intensity of yearning and aspiration of the soul is fierce. You should do that.
He also speaks there of they sojourned with an ever-living bliss. So also bliss can be very intense.
These compositions, they are very creative.
So they put an odd note inside so that the music becomes more rich.
Okay, now let's just reflect on this last passage a little. So here Sri Aurobindo begins describing some of the young disciples that are gathering around these different sages and seers and ascetics who are being influenced, fashioned by their touch.
All the princes used to go to the gurus and they were mostly living in groups. They used to change their forest and they used to come back to the guru.
So these young disciples were developing also by being seated next to these sages and saints. Far wandering seekers on the Eternal's path, brought to these quiet founts their spirit's thirst, and spent the treasure of a silent hour, bathed in the purity of the mild gaze that uninsistent ruled them from its peace, and by its influence found the ways of calm. So here he's speaking of seekers who may be wandering far looking for a guru, a saint, a sage, finding one, and bathing in the purity of the gaze of these saints and seers, coming under their influence, feeling their silence. And then the infants of the monarchy of the worlds, heroic leaders of a coming time, king children nurtured in that spacious air. So this almost sounds as if perhaps some of the kings would send their children to these sages and saints to come and learn and come under their influence. So they also were nurtured in that spacious air, that spiritual influence, like lions gamboling in sky and sun, as if like lions playing under the sky before these saints and sages received half-consciously their godlike stamp. They may be too young to understand or to really receive it directly, but still unconsciously they're receiving something from these people, formed in the type of the high thoughts they sang. So they may be reciting various slokas from the Vedas, and they're absorbing from that something of that wisdom. They learn the wide magnificence of mood that makes us comrades of the cosmic urge. Something of the mood and atmosphere of that place uplifted them and made them comrades of the cosmic urge. Well, that's again that kind of aspiration that is there in nature, but in all things in the universe, and is being exemplified in these sages and saints. No longer chained to their small separate selves, plastic and firm beneath the eternal hand, met nature with a bold and friendly clasp and served in her the power that shapes her works. So they became plastic beneath the hand of the divine, perhaps under the influence of these sages. Now we continue. We go to Nitya. One soul to all, fourth line.
One soul to all, and free from narrowing bonds, large like a continent of warm sunshine, in wide equality's impartial joy. These sages breathed for God's delight in things, assisting the slow entries of the gods, sowing in young minds immortal thoughts they lived, taught the great truth to which man's race must rise, or open the gates of freedom to a few. Imparting to our struggling world the light, they breathe like spirits from time's dull yoke released, comrades and vessels of the cosmic force, using a natural mastery like the sun's. Their speech, their silence was a help to earth. A magic happiness flowed from their touch. Oneness was sovereign in that sylvan peace. The wild beast joined in friendship with its prey, persuading the hatred and the strife to cease. The love that flows from the one mother's breast healed with their hearts the hard and wounded world.
Thank you. Here, Sri Aurobindo seems to be describing these sages in general, that they were one-souled to all, free from the narrowing bonds of their thought, life. They were large like a continent of warm sunshine, in wide equality's impartial joy. Sri Aurobindo speaks of this equality, a passive equality that's detached from all that happens, unaffected, but also a dynamic, positive equality that embraces all with joy. These sages breathed for God's delight in things. That was their purpose in life, just to enjoy the delight in all things. Assisting the slow entries of the gods, assisting the infiltration of the divine into life, sowing in young minds immortal thoughts. They taught the great truth to which man's race must rise, or open the gates of freedom to a few. Imparting to our struggling world the light. They breathed like spirits from time's dull yoke released, comrades and vessels of the cosmic force. That cosmic force is flowing through them, uplifting all those around them, using a natural mastery like the sun's, because they've become pure, transparent channels of this force. It flows through them naturally, like the sunlight. Their speech, their silence was a help to earth. And then a magic happiness flowed from their touch. Oneness was sovereign in that sylvan peace. They felt that oneness with all around them, and that atmosphere infiltrated all, such that even the wild beast joined in friendship with its prey. Even the lions might lay down with the lambs, with the goats, beside these sages and seers, because of that absolute peace and silence that they brought down around them, that permeated the atmosphere. The love that flows from the one mother's breast healed with their hearts the hard and wounded earth. Oh, the wounded world. So let's finish this passage. There's just one more reading, B.
Others escaped from the confines of thought to where mind motionless sleeps, waiting for light's birth, and came back quivering with a nameless force, drunk with a wine of lightning in their cells. Intuitive knowledge leaping into speech, seized, vibrant, kindling with the inspired word. Hearing the subtle voice that clothes the heavens, carrying the splendor that has lit the suns, They sang infinity's names and deathless powers in meters that reflect the moving worlds. Sight's sound waves breaking from the soul's great deeps. Some lost to the person and his strip of thought in a motionless ocean of impersonal power, sat mighty, visioned with the infinite's light, or comrades of the everlasting will, surveyed the plan of past and future time. Some winged like birds out of the cosmic sea and vanished into a bright and featureless vast. Some, silent, watched the universal dance, or helped the world by world indifference. Some watched no more, merged in a lonely self, absorbed in the trance from which no soul returns. All the occult world lines forever closed. The chains of birth and person cast away. Some uncompanioned reach the ineffable.
Thank you. So here, Sri Aurobindo takes us quickly through some of the different types of realizations that these sages and yogis may have realized, escaping from the confines of thought to where a mind motionless sleeps, waiting light's birth, and then came back quivering with a nameless force, drunk with a wine of lightning in their cells. Opening up into the spiritual consciousness and then receiving from above this power and force and enlightenment coming down into their body. Intuitive knowledge leaping into speech, seized, vibrant, kindling with the inspired word. Hearing the subtle voice that clothes the heavens, the subtle voice that gives form, gives expression to the heavens, carrying the splendor that has lit the suns. They sang infinity's names and deathless powers in meters that reflect the moving worlds, chanting the names of the divine in these mantric verses. Sights, sound waves breaking from the soul's great deeps. This is the inspired word giving expression to the spiritual vision, coming out, breaking from the soul's great deeps. Some losing sense of their individual person and mind, sat in a motionless ocean of impersonal power, sat mighty, visioned with the infinite's light, or comrades of the everlasting will, surveyed the plan of past and future time. Some were looking at the divine's will being expressed in the past and future time, seeing that in their vision. Some winged like birds out of the cosmic sea, out of the cosmos, out of manifestation, and vanished into a bright and featureless vast, escaped into the transcendent. Some silent watched the universal dance, like this witness, consciousness observing, or helped the world by world indifference. Some watched no more, merged in a lonely self, absorbed in the trance from which no soul returns. All the occult world lines forever closed, the chains of birth and person cast away. Some, uncompanioned, reached the ineffable. Some just shot out of manifestation into the ineffable, closing the way to return.
This survey that he has done is so extensive to cover all the types of spiritualities it seems. But I think what my feeling is he's setting up a context for Savitri. She's going to be there next to that for clear. But then it's a contrast with what she's going to do. She's not going to escape the world.
Right.
She's going to take it out.
Dance with. You want to read the line?
Universal dance.
What's the full line?
Some silent watch the universal dance.
Yeah.
So universal dance is generally the dance of the light, Ananda. There's also dance of destruction, but this universal dance is. I think this because I saw a video of this martial mind which did a painting of the universal dance. So I don't know.
Yeah, in a general sense, I think it just means the whole universal movement, that they're watching, detached from that, observing that universal movement. They're not shooting off away from it. They keep it in their vision, in their experience, but they're still uninvolved with it. But the dance is, there's this dance of Shiva, there's the dance of destruction, there's a dance of creation. It's that whole movement of the universe. So we stop there for today.
attuned to the universal will, content in Him who smiles behind earth's frown, above unbelieved by the system today, above them like glade trees, guarding a hill, young brave disciples fashioned by their touch, trained to this simple act and conscious word, drain within and go to heal their hearts.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.